Aztalan, Cannibalism, Paranormal Experience, Red-Haired Giants, Ho-Chunk Legend of Redhorn, Viking Settlements. Let me tell you the story about a haunted place called Aztalan that I visited to do research for the second book of my children's series, The Library Kids, The Serpent of Rock Lake. Aztalan is a mysterious place near Rock Lake, Lake Mills, Wisconsin. The site was abandoned, and no one knows why to this day. There are stories of fights between the inhabitants and a character called Redhorn of the Ho-Chunk. Aztalan State Park is Wisconsin's most important archaeological site. The remains are from a Mississippian people's village that existed approximately between 900 and 1300 AD, possibly 900 and 1200 AD. This time period is consistent with the time period of an apparent Viking colonization of America between 800 and 1300 AD. Aztalan was rediscovered in 1836 by a man named Timothy Johnson when he found the ruins of Aztalan, now attributed to 172 acres of land. Evidence of fortification, farming, and large pyramids exist. Aztalan is considered one of the most northern outposts of the Mississippian people. Many artifacts belong to Middle Mississippian culture, but there are also artifacts from woodland peoples, and there appears to be a blend of the two cultures at Aztalan. All of the homes were either circular or rectangular in shape. The walls were made of a plaster called daub, which was a mixture of clay and grass. Roofs were made of bark or thatch. The majority of the homes had an entrance facing the south, which pointed away from the cold winds coming from the north. Pole-frame beds were used. Food such as corn, nuts, and seeds were stored in woven bags and put in large pits inside the home. Meat and other perishables were stored outside of the home, where the cooking was mostly done. I decided to visit this mysterious place during the winter and see for myself what the place looked like. I went to the main park and got out to see the Crawfish River. I saw the large pyramid mounds next. There were 3 of them, as the brochure had mentioned. No one was there, and the place was absolutely peaceful. It felt like home to me. The layout was consistent with other sites I later visited, which always seems to include a city complex of pyramid mounds next to a river or main water source. Sometimes the pyramids are laid out as a calendar, usually they are, and fortification. I walked through the snow to the large pyramid mound and walked up the steps. I walked to the top where the snow had melted, and I looked around. I felt as if I had been there before. I noticed the stockade fence and wondered what it was like for the inhabitants who lived there. Next, I drove to the Princess Mound. The Princess Mound contained the body of a woman who was in her 20s when she died. She was buried with 3 shell belts that contained various shells, and some of them came from the Gulf of Mexico. It was an unusual burial, and the woman was thought to be someone of importance, or perhaps someone who had died under a unique condition, because her burial was far away from the other burial mounds and her belts were elaborate. Perhaps the woman was murdered. I got out again and no one was around. There were no animals and the museum was closed. There was some snow on the ground and at the Princess Mound as well. I began to take pictures of the Princess Mound and then I heard it. Behind me was a rattling type noise that came from nowhere. I turned around but could see no one or anything that was causing this noise. I turned back around and began to take another picture, and then the rattling noise came back right behind me. I turned again, but there was nothing there. I looked at the trees behind the grave to see if there were any animals, but there were none. I looked all around, but there was nothing. So I turned and I began to take one more picture, and the noise came back again behind me for the third time. I turned and I could find nothing that had caused this sound. At this point, I decided it was time to go. Perhaps the mound is haunted, as others have said it is, and the sound that I heard was from the shell belts of the princess who didn't want me there alone at the mound, but she did let me know she was still there. Now, after this visit and subsequent visits to other Mississippian sites, I was able to locate a scholarly paper on Aztalan that describes scientific evidence that some of the members of Aztalan were related to some of the people who lived in the ancient site of Cahokia in Illinois. This paper was written by T. Douglas Price, James H. Burton, and James B. Stoltman and was entitled Place of Origin of Prehistoric Inhabitants of Aztalan, Jefferson County, Wisconsin. The paper was published in American Antiquity, Volume 72, Number 3, July 2007, pages 524 to 538. The paper describes a test done that used strontium isotopes found in human teeth and bone, and the researchers were able to determine that remains of individuals found at Aztalan were related to some remains of the individuals found at Cahokia. No DNA tests were ever done and probably never will be on the remains at Aztalan or Cahokia. Per the paper, the isotopic signal for some of the foreigners matches values from Cahokia, but does not prove that this was their place of origin. Now, some people think that the site, Aztalan, is related to the Aztecs of Mexico. That is a possibility I'll get into later in some different videos. Now, the brick that was made at Aztalan was made from clay daub. Daub was a mixture of clay and grass. Now, the paper that I just previously mentioned further states that other connections between Aztalan and Cahokia were observed in the prehistoric artifacts and architecture found at both sites. Now, I further visited the Milwaukee Public Museum, and I observed some of the artifacts from Aztalan on display. There were no skeletal remains, but there were several arrowheads and tools, pottery that included spirals similar to Celtic design, and many other pieces of pottery. It is further reported that the evidence of cannibalism claimed was not found at Aztalan, but in a paper by the Charlotte Observer, an article called Picnic with Cannibals, the Ho-Chunk admitted to this practice as a ritual done to enemies. Quote, in Wisconsin, the Ho-Chunks themselves recite a story in which they greeted some Illinois people who were potential enemies by killing them, putting them in a pot, then boiling and eating them. It was not food, but to show great disdain. Now, there is Siouian, which includes the Ho-Chunk people, legend that tells the tale of red-haired giants that oppressed them until one red-haired giant helped them out. He was called Redhorn due to his long red hair. It is said that Redhorn also mated with a native woman, and the union produced at least one son, possibly two, with red hair that fought and killed the evil red-haired giants when they grew up. Now, there was a prominent PhD anthropologist named Robert J. Salzar who investigated a cave up in Wisconsin called the Gotchel site. In that Gotchel site, there were many panels of petroglyphs that told the story of Redhorn and other things. This cave was vandalized and someone tried to cut out part of the panels with a chainsaw. So the cave was closed up, claimed by the Ho Chunk to be theirs, and is no longer being investigated. However, Dr. Salazar wrote a book called The Gotchal Rock Shelter. I'm going to get into the Gotchal Rock Shelter in another video, but for now I'd like to read what he wrote about Redhorn. The legend of Redhorn is an example of the Warwick body of literature. It is therefore thought to be true, and the hero is a person, human and mortal, and the events described are believed to be true, probably subject to minor reworking over time and poetic embellishments of details. It is a lengthy tale, and it has many of the attributes of a heroic saga. We can only summarize here the relevant parts of the transcription provided by Radin in 1948. Redhorn is the youngest of 10 brothers, and he is known as he who gets hit with deer lungs. After winning an important foot race, he announces to his brothers that he was created in heaven, and that his creators call him he who wears human heads as earrings, and he also says that people on earth should call him Redhorn. His brothers are very pleased. Redhorn grows up and becomes a famous leader and great athlete, and he demonstrates his curing powers. Among his friends are Turtle and Storms as he walks, a thunderbird who has chosen to live as a mortal. Radin believes that Redhorn is also an earthly form of either the evening or the morning star. He marries a woman called the girl who wears a white beaver skin for a wrap. Time passes, and villages of Ho Chunk are attacked by a mysterious race of giants. Through an intermediary, Redhorn gets the giants to agree to a contest of stickball lacrosse as a substitute for war. The giants arrive, and the best player among them is a red-haired giant chieftainess who falls in love with Redhorn and betrays her own people. Redhorn's team is victorious, and they kill all of the giant players except the giantess, who becomes Redhorn's second wife. But they are challenged to more games, and finally Redhorn, Storms as he walks, Turtle, and the rest of Redhorn's people are killed. Redhorn's 2 sons, one by each wife, escape the slaughter and grow up rapidly. They search out the village of the giants, and with some help from magic, kill the giants in their village. In the giants' houses they find the bones of Redhorn and others and return them to their own village, where the dead are subsequently resurrected. Okay, so you can see that the native Ho Chunk in that area of Aztalan admitted to red-haired giants being in the area and going to war with them. The time period for Aztalan, between 900 and 1200 AD, is right within the time frame of 800 to 1300 AD, when the Vikings were coming over to create settlements. I believe, per my research, that many of the Mississippian and Coloradoan complexes were initiated by these red-haired people. Some of the natives got along with them, and others did not. And further, in these mysterious complexes that popped up between this time frame of 800 to 1300 AD in the Americas, there's always a tale about cannibalism that goes with them. Here at Aztalan, there was no evidence of it, but yet the Ho Chunk admit to it. And I believe that the Vikings probably came over, and they either were bred out, killed off, there's evidence of warfare, or they were forced to stop immigration due to the Black Plague that was sweeping through Europe after the 1300 AD. Now, I also believe that these people that had the red hair were part of what the Viking or the Nordics called Jotun. Jotun would be people or bloodlines that were not part of the Crownide bloodline. and they were in competition with the Crow Knights, so they were not part of the cult of Jupiter Sabazius, and that may be another reason that the history is suppressed. The spiral designs indicate possibly a matriarchal society, or at least one observant of the sacred feminine, and it is also a symbol found throughout all of the Mississippian people, whereas the swastika, or swastika if you prefer, is commonly found out in the south west among the Coloradoan peoples, which is also a Nordic symbol. And lastly, mound building and pyramid building and effigies was just prevalent in Europe. So there you have it, Aztalan connected to Cahokia, and I will get into more connections with the red-haired giants and this story of cannibalism in further videos. Thank you.